Hi, I'm the OBG, and today I'm going to be talking about the ego. It's often said that we should shed the ego. People are always talking about it. Oh, he's got too much ego, she's got too much ego. And then the New Agers, the travellers and hippies, they're all about getting rid of your ego. You must shed your ego, you must shed your ego. But however, I have a different story, and I'm open to change your mind. So, Freud, who was the founder of the id, ego, and the superego, had personality theory, which he put forward in 1923. And he created a tripartite psyche, and that's three parts to it. This was the id, the ego, and the superego. And people hold on to these as almost physical aspects or as part of the brain, and they're not. I've never understood why people keep talking about getting rid of their egos. I accuse them of not understanding Freud's creation and being victim to a systematic brainwashing that is likely attempting to bring us to our animal state. So, as a continuation of a section in the recent show where I talked about not shedding your ego, I've decided to explain, but with a little bit more detail. So, in short, the id is a primitive part and it runs by instinct and contains sexual and aggressive drives and hidden memories. The ego is a part that mediates between the desires of the id and the superego, and the superego operates as a moral conscience. Now, I'm not making this up. This is Freud's invention. This is his discovery. This is what he says it is, and this is what psychoanalysis uses and psychologists to, work with people. So when people say you have to get rid of your ego, I don't think they've read a single leaf from a Freud book. So I'm going to explain each in a little more detail. The id is a primitive and instinctive component of personality, and it consists of all the inherited, biological components of our personality, and it's present at birth, including the sex, which is life, instinct, eros, which contains a libido, and the aggressive death instinct, which is called thanatos. And the id is the impulsive and unconscious part of our psyche, which responds directly and immediately to basic urges, basic needs and desires. And the personality of the newborn child is all id, and it later develops as part into the ego and superego. And the id remains infantile in its function throughout a person's life, and it doesn't change with time or experience, and it is not in touch with the external world. The id is not affected by reality, logic, or everyday world, as it operates within the unconscious mind as part of the mind. So the id operates on the pleasure principle, which is the idea that every wishful impulse should be satisfied immediately, regardless of the consequences. And when the id achieves its demands, we experience pleasure. And if they're not met, then we experience, let's say, unpleasure. Then you've got the ego, and Freud stated that the ego is that part of the id which has been modified by the direct influence of the external world. So the ego develops to mediate between the unrealistic id and its demands and the external world. It is a decision-making component of personality. Ideally, the ego works by reason, whereas the id is chaotic and unreasonable. The ego operates according to the reality principle, and it works out realistic ways of satisfying its demands, often compromising or postponing satisfaction to avoid negative consequences of society. And the ego considers social realities and norms, etiquette and rules in deciding how to behave. Like the id, the ego seeks pleasure, tension reduction, and avoids pain. But unlike the id, the ego is concerned with devising a realistic strategy to obtain pleasure. The ego has no concept of right or wrong. Something is good simply if it achieves its ends of satisfying without causing harm to itself or the id. If the ego fails in its attempt to use the reality principle and anxiety is experienced, unconscious defense mechanisms are employed, and those are employed to help ward off unpleasant feelings or to make good things feel better for the individual. And the ego engages in secondary process thinking, which is rational, realistic, and oriented towards problem solving. If a plan of action doesn't work, then it is thought through again until a solution is found. And this is known as reality testing, and enables a person to control their impulses and demonstrate self-control via mastery of the ego. An important feature of clinical and social work is to enhance ego functioning and help the client test reality through assisting the client to work through their options. And then you've got the superego, and the superego develops around age of 3 to 5. Then the superego's function is to control its impulses, especially those which society forbids, such as sex and aggression. It also has a function of persuading the ego to turn to moralistic goals rather than simply realistic ones, and to strive for perfection. The superego consists of two systems, the conscience and the ideal self. The conscience can punish the ego through causing feelings of guilt. For example, if the ego gives in to its demands, the superego may make the person feel bad through guilt. And the ideal self, or ego ideal, is an imaginary picture of how you ought to be and represents career aspirations, how to treat other people, and how to behave as a member of society. Behaviour which falls short of the ideal self may be punished by the superego through guilt. And the superego can also reward us through the ideal self when we behave properly by making us feel proud. If a person's ideal self is too high a standard, then whatever the person does will represent failure. The ideal self and conscience are largely determined in childhood from parental values and how we were brought up. So I hope I've cleared up some of the ego misconceptions, and it was a short explanation, but I hope to expound on these more in future shows. And I also mentioned defense mechanisms earlier, and defense mechanisms are psychological strategies that are unconsciously used to protect a person from anxiety arising from unacceptable thoughts or feelings. And there are many, but denial, projection, repression, and regression are a few things. And those are the things that I strategize around when I'm having many conversations or arguments with people, or problematic people, I should say. So, do you still want to get rid of your ego? Didn't think so. I'm the OBG.